All right. Hello. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you might be in the world. I hope you're having a good day. My name is Maria Wikvila, and I am the founder of ApplicantLab.com, which is an online service that provides the same advice and guidance as an expensive admissions consultant, but instead of charging you thousands and thousands of dollars, it is a low flat rate. It is a DIY platform available 24/7. So thank you all for being here today. What we're going to do is this is a profile evaluation. So we've got three candidates on the line who are, they've sent me their backgrounds, and we're going to talk a little bit about their backgrounds now. And we're going to talk about their plans and their goals and try to figure out, what they should be doing to either bolster their profiles if necessary, and whatnot. And so my hope is that if you are watching this and one of these candidates has something that's similar to your background, that you will learn something from this. So with that out of the way, let's get started. We have our first candidate here, MK008.
Thank you.
So I don't know, MK, if you want to sort of walk through what your background is. We can all see it up here on the slide, but maybe you can sort of talk us through where you've been in the past and where you want to go.
Sure. Thank you, Maria, for taking my application of reviewing my profile. First of all, I would then start with a walkthrough of my resume. So I graduated from a college in University of Delhi in 2016, after which I joined a multinational bank based in US, where I was working as a business analyst for around 2 years. After 2 years, in 2018, I got promoted as a senior marketing analyst in the same bank. I worked there for around 1 year and then moved on to India's one of India's largest unicorn in the logistics industry, where I'm currently working. So overall, I had like 4.5 years of experience in the analytics industry. I have also co-founded a non-profit organization, which is called the First Salary Foundation, with the sole mission of helping people, students in their job hunt. And we believe that it should be free and stress-free for everyone. I've also, I plan to, after my MBA, I plan to switch from analytics to product management and development with the long-term goal of starting my own edtech venture. That's all about me.
Okay, excellent. So you made a career switch, and correct me if I'm wrong, but between your sort of first major job and your second job, you went from being a marketing analytics person at a bank, and now you're at a logistics company. But is your function a lot different, or is it just that the companies are different? Because I know you're not doing marketing right now. You're more like analyzing things in the logistics optimization. You're helping them with that part of it.
Yes. So technically, the work remains similar, but the business and the industry is quite different. So I'm helping across these two companies. I am helping solve like really different kind of problems. The first one was business marketing, and now it is more of operations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what, just out of curiosity, what led you to choose this new job?
One of the major factors was that in an MNC, they already have a product developed. I wanted to move to a startup where the products were still in the development phase, which I could contribute to and observe from close quarters. So that was one of the major factors while deciding to switch companies.
Okay. And have you been able to get involved even from a distance in the product cycle or the product process?
Yes, so we were developing for one of the newest verticals. We were acquiring a client and developing a product for them, which I was involved in, and a few other projects. Yeah.
Okay. And that would be this. Here you used a term E to E, and I don't know. I know B to C, and I know B to B, but I don't know E to E. Is that what does that mean? Or?
It is enterprise. It's like enterprise solution from end to end. So it's like warehousing and transportation, everything, inventory management.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was like enterprise to enterprise or okay. So end to end. So this is just a quick resume comment that I hope applies to a lot of people. Like there are certain terms that everyone knows, like B2C or EBITDA or ROI, but I don't know that E2E is necessarily super well known. So you might want to, in your resume, the first time, if you're going to use it a lot, then write out like end to end, and then put in parentheses what you mean by that, or the shorter version of that, E2E, and then that way you can use E2E throughout the rest. Because I was like, I guess it has something to do with logistics because that's the company you're at, but I didn't understand it as end to end because I don't work in logistics. So that's just a little thing. So I think one thing is it's really important because when I was first looking at this profile and then I saw that your goals are to work from analytics to product management, I was like, well, I'm not really sure that I see that jump. I'm not really sure that I see how you can get from here to there, because the way how you describe your job in the resume, you need to like lead the reader along. So if you want to make a switch into something like product management, you need to throw in words that are related to product management, even if that's not your title, right? So if you could say something like, here you led a team of X people to do something, you could say something like, led a team to launch a new product. Or you could even say, I product managed the launch of a new thing, even if that's not your title, because that way, when the reader, they read your resume first, and then when they get the rest of your application, and they see like, oh, I want to become a product manager, it's not like, well, okay, but I don't really get the connection, right? So it's up to you to describe, and this applies for everyone. If you're trying to make a sort of career switch in your MBA, in your resume, try to put in either words that are relevant to your future career or anything that will be valuable to that future career, right? So if you were involved with, anything that is beyond the analytics part, like interviewing customers to try to understand their needs, or working with the engineering team to make the interface easier to use, anything like that is really important to put in. So then that way, that bridge from where you are now to where you want to go is a lot clearer. You might also want to, at some point, and I don't know that I would do this now, but there are a lot of like online coding boot camps types of things. And so, you're clearly bright based on your, where you went to school, what you majored in, and how well you did. But, I don't see any, like I can code in PHP or, Java or whatever. And I don't think that has to go on the resume, but I do think if you can start to enroll in a class in those technical skills, it's just going to help you make the argument to admissions committees that you can make that switch. And it's also going to help you, frankly, once you get to business school and you're trying to make that switch, it's going to help you to have that technological lingo that you can use to work with software engineers, right? So maybe something like that to sort of prove that you can make that switch. Another thing I also really advocate that everyone do, especially anyone who's doing a career switch, is try to talk to people who have made a similar switch. So they have to, anything that, if you find someone who was doing this type of work that you're doing now, who then went to business school and was able to switch to product management, then you can cite that person in a lot of your applications. And you could say something like, well, I spoke to John Doe and he used to work in logistics analytics and now he's working at Amazon as a product manager because he got his MBA at Cornell and it worked. You know what I mean? So then that way you can make that argument that like, look, it's totally possible that I can make the switch because I found someone else who did it. So then that helps sort of allay the fears in the minds of the admissions committee. Another comment I would make on the resume that I hope applies to a lot of people is that there were some things, especially in your last job, where you said something like, well, I brought in more revenue, and you put the number there. But I don't know, it sounds like a big number, but since I don't know what the overall number for that whole department was, I don't know if that amount that you brought in is a little bit or a lot. So if it was like a noticeable amount, if it was like, if you're like, Maria, honestly, it was like 0.001%, then leave the percentage out. But if the percentage was like, I don't know, 5% or more, then you might want to put in parentheses after that big number, like a 6% increase or something like that. So then that way the reader can orient themselves because this number at a small company would be life-changing, but this number at a big company might not mean a lot. So that will help provide that context as well. Similarly, for your undergraduate, for example, you put what your grades were, your percentage was with your grades. Since I don't know that department, I don't know that college. If you were in the top X percent, put that right up there, like also perhaps in parentheses. So my grades were whatever, 80 whatever percent, top 10% of class, or top 5% of class. These little things will help this reader who's never met you before start to put these pieces together. Now, in your day-to-day job, in terms of this new product that you helped launch, was this a case where like the senior management came to you and said, okay, we want to launch this, and here's what we want it to do, and here's the date and the deadline, and go? Or were you in any way involved in the conceptualization of this idea?
So how it happened is that we met the client a few times to understand the requirements and conceptualize the product before we launched it. As you said, like meeting the engineering team and the software development team and the UI UX team to get this done.
Okay. So I think any place where you have, especially, you're targeting Harvard and Stanford, especially for schools like that, it's important to really show how, not just sort of what you did, but how did you change your company? So obviously, as you might have seen in some of my other videos, the higher you aim for the school, the higher the bar is for impact that you've had professionally. So if somebody has, if somebody went to your company, there's like opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So if somebody is like, they're just executing orders, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that person's not going to get into business school. They might. But for a Harvard or Stanford, the bar is way higher. The bar would be more like, I convinced senior management to launch a new division, and then I led the launch. Or, they're able to point to ways they really changed the company, or they really helped the company grow in a new market, in a new direction, things like that. So that's something you can try to be, if you haven't had that experience yet, maybe that's something you can try to start to work into your experience over the next couple of months, because we still have 9 months or even 12 months if you wait until round 2 to sort of start to make that impact bigger. And in terms of the ed tech goal, I will say, the leap to product management was sort of already like a little like, okay, that's a bit of a leap. I guess I can buy it, but it's a bit of a leap. But then beyond that, the longer term thing to ed tech, that's a harder, because you've been in banking and you've been in logistics. I know you started a nonprofit that is like a career-based, career advice, career job hunting nonprofit. So if anything, I would say the long term that you want to do something with job hunting, career hunting, something like that, or you want to stay in the logistics sector, because what you say in your application and what you actually do don't have to be the real, you can get to business school, and once you get in, you can do real estate, you can do pharmaceuticals, you can do, but in order to get in, there needs to be as little cognitive friction in that application. Like there's moments where like the reader goes, wait, what? You don't want any of those moments. So in order for the story to blend together as nicely as possible, like just sort of put something that's like, oh yeah, I want to keep working in either logistics, or I want to keep going in career advising, or job hunting advice. But so have it be consistent with something you've done in the past. So then that way that doesn't create a moment of cognitive friction. Also a salary, I just looked at the word salary on your resume. Also on a resume note that might apply to a lot of people listening here, you list you started a nonprofit, which is great. But you listed on your resume underneath your work you put it under experience, like a big bucket of experience. So you've got your work experience and the nonprofit. The issue with that is that experience normally means like full-time work experience. And so when I was reading this, I read your current job, and then under that I read the foundation. And after that, I skipped down to Citibank. And it took me a second to realize, like, wait. The foundation that I had to look at the date, do the math, and say, like, wait a minute, whoa, she was employed while this is probably a thing she did on the side. So I recommend in that case to pull out that sort of nonprofit work to like the other or under the additional type of thing, because otherwise it's like, wait, from banking to nonprofit to logistics, like, wow, she's really bounced around in her career. She doesn't really know what she wants. So I would separate that out into its own section. And then the final thing I would say is, I do think that you may your undergraduate grades are good. I do think that you may want to retake the GMAT to be more competitive to top U.S. schools.
Sure.
So with that, those are sort of my comments. Do you have any questions for me?
So I have one question for you. In the application, they also have certain sections where you can talk about your work experience or the key accomplishments. How many of those things that you list there has also to be included in the resume versus how much can it be different? Like, how do we blend both of them in?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So definitely don't just copy and paste because that just looks like you didn't really care. What I tend to tell people is the resume is the more kind of formal, businessy speak version. In those little boxes in the application form, I tell people to describe it more conversationally, and also to start to include some details that wouldn't normally go onto a resume that point to leadership skills. So something like convinced a skeptical client to do blah, 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 or overcame internal politics to get a team to work together, right? Some of those things that might be a little too much information for the resume. You can add some more color around what that experience was like and what you had to do to get that over the finish line. You could also say something like, I was essentially a product manager or acting as an internal product manager or something like that. You can try to phrase things again in a way that the phrasing of it helps that person see you as a potential future product manager and not like analytics. Because the way it was described here, I knew you were involved in the launching of something, a dashboard, but it wasn't clear to me that was like a new product, right? So just sort of, I was thinking of you more like as a logistics analytics person and not as someone, doing the product management stuff. So use that as another opportunity to really highlight. You're not gonna have room for everything in that little box in the application form. So just really highlight your greatest hits and describe it in a more conversational way, adding in those details that they might not have otherwise guessed.
Sorry, Maria, I just have one more question for you. It also says that schools do a background check on you. So the question is that if I list that I was the acting product manager, how would they fact check that?
So
I don't think that.
Right. So you wouldn't put that as your title, right? If you put it as your title, that's lying. But you can say that was your responsibility, and then here's where the recommendation can come in. And if someone at your current company is going to be one of your recommenders, they can back you up there. They can say, she went well beyond the description of her technical role, of her title. She went well beyond that and was essentially acting as an internal product manager, and it helped us get this big client.
Oh, thanks. That explains.
Yeah. All right, great. So with that, let's move on. We've got Vignesh is next. So I don't know, Vignesh. Oh, there you are. You can turn on your camera. Oh, MK8 is out. All right. So similar to our last person, Vignesh, can you please just walk us through your experience and where you want to go?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm a 2018 BITS Pilani graduate. I have a bachelor's in pharmacy. And right after college, due to a few personal reasons and commitments, I was really drawn towards the field of public health. So in the space of public health, you have an iterative loop. You have policy, which you have research, which leads to policy making, which leads to program implementation. So I wasn't really interested in the research aspect of it, but I was really drawn towards the policy and more importantly, the program implementation. So I really wanted to work from the ground level, from the grassroots. So my first job was in Tata Trust. I was working for the National Nutrition Mission, which was a joint initiative between Tata Trust and the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So in this role, it required me to travel from village to village, mandal to mandal in a district, taking capacity building sessions, finding challenges at the grassroots level, and listing those challenges and presenting them to senior bureaucrats, and if possible, also recommend a few solutions for the field level. So two of my recommendations actually got accepted, and they were featured in the Tata Trust monthly magazine as well. My boss in Tata Trust, my immediate boss, was a Harvard graduate, and she was happy with my work, and she's ready to write my LOR. Moving on, I worked for 19 months in the district, and based on my work in the district, I got offered a bigger role in Delhi. So my current role is in an organization called ICC-IDD. It's the Indian Coalition for Control of Iodine Deficiency Disorders. It is the Indian arm of Iodine Global Network, which is the official technical partner of the World Health Organization for Iodine Deficiency Disorders. So when we talk about malnutrition, we talk about macronutrients and micronutrients. So the developing world, at least, is moving from macronutrient deficiencies to micronutrient deficiencies, and iodine is one such micronutrient that is very deficient. So you can't just recommend eating diets rich in these micronutrients, because different geographical settings have different challenges. You have urban, rural, and even in rural, you have very backward and tribal populations, and same solution can't work for everyone. So the solution that was devised, an upcoming solution, a solution that can gain a lot of traction in the next few years, is food fortification. So that's my current field of work, working in food technology and food fortification and fortifying staple foods. So I work in a very small team. My current boss is also a member of the Prime Minister's Committee member for India Nutrition Challenges, and we're a very small team. 4 of us, 5 of us, we work end to end. We get funding from like-minded development organizations, and I currently lead a project funded by UNICEF. And we also have WHO and Tata Trust and BMGF and GAIN also funding in similar aspects in micronutrient initiatives. And so I request funding based on the program document. I list the program outcomes, I list the program activities, and justify our quarterly activities, and then submit the end report. So end to end, where everyone is participating in every one of these activities. And moving on, I've listed my target schools, and I've chosen these schools because not just the MBA aspect, they also have a very good public health program in their schools. So I can also maybe take in a few electives and mingle with a few other students in the school, especially Yale. Yale has its very flagship program of its bigger ecosystem. So that's how I pick my target schools. And extracurriculars, they're not listed in this slide, but I think they're listed in my resume. I try to keep myself busy, and in any initiative that I can be a part of, Toastmasters or any tribal health initiatives or blog writing, I always take a part in it, but I don't know how to put that in my essay. I think that's about it.
Okay, great. So it's interesting that when you were, for example, just now, the description that you gave me of your background was far more rich and informative than I think what's currently on your resume. So for example, for your job at the Tata Trust, right? You had said, I formulate hypotheses to improve, to come up with ideas to improve nutrition, and I audit these services. But you didn't tell me at any point that any of your ideas had been accepted and had actually done anything. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was not tailored for a B school. It was tailored for a job application. So I didn't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was like, you need to tell me. Because right now it was like, the original version that I'm looking at was like, you said I worked with people, but it was very vague what that means. I worked with people, and we were trying to solve this malnutrition problem. But your particular role, when you say I worked with people, I worked with these people and that person, I worked with district officials, I worked with consultants, I worked with, it wasn't clear to me. So what were you exactly doing when you say I worked with them, right? Were you leading the team in the discussion forward, or were you getting them coffee, right? So you need to be pretty specific in what was exactly your role. And when you said like, oh, I came up with ideas, I developed hypotheses to improve the nutritional status of the district, I then wrote in all caps next to it, and did you? Like, you said, I'm coming up with these ideas that are meant to do X and Y, but you didn't actually say if you did it or if you actually succeeded in doing it. So I'm glad that you said that this is, sort of a first. I would really want you to focus on results. I really want you to focus on like, if you came up with 2 solutions that were accepted, I want that to be the first bullet point, right? Developed 2 new programs that were accepted by the government of whatever or whoever had to accept it, that decreased malnutrition that is estimated to decrease malnutrition by 15% for 20,000 children. So really quantifying what that impact is, as opposed to saying, well, here's what my job was. My job involved collecting the data. My job involved presenting the data. My job, make it more about, once I did present the data, here's what happened. Here's the change I was able to drive. Here's what I was able to push through and make happen. So I would advise you to focus on that. And it was a little bit similar for your current job, where you say like, oh, my current job is, it involves, I create budgets and I publish a newsletter, but you're not really telling me like, okay, I publish a newsletter which helped us get a new funder, right? Someone in a nonprofit read my newsletter and decided to give us more money. Or I created a newsletter which helps people feel more connected to our mission, that highlight, instead of saying I made a newsletter, tell me what was the impact of that newsletter. Or I created a budget that originally we were going to shut this program down because we thought it was too expensive, but then when I created the budget, I was able to salvage it. Do you see the difference? Okay, great. The other thing that I would say is, and this is sort of like a resume comment, but I think it applies to a lot of people. I think for you, in case you're like, wow, Maria, but I already was taking up a page, and so if I add in all these details, how am I going to make room for it? I can think of 2 things off the top of my head easily. One is you have a line underneath your titles that says roles and responsibilities include : and then you move down. Like it's implicit that these are your roles and responsibilities, right? Like it's a resume. So you don't have to put that 3 times. So I just saved you 3 lines. Boom, presto. And the other thing was you also have on your resume this internship that you did a few years ago. And I guess maybe the rationale for putting it is that you are on the younger side. And so maybe you were thinking about like, oh, I should add this internship in that I did to sort of bolster the amount of experience that I have. Was that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And also because it was a 6-month internship, it was not a small time. So I thought it would.
For me, it's not so much the duration of the internship. It's more that it really is not involved anything at all with public health, nutrition, and so because of that, I think if you could perhaps even take it out altogether, because you graduated in 2018 and then your job at the Tata Trust starts in 2018. So there's no gap in your resume. So if you leave it out completely, no one's going to say, wait, but didn't he have an internship? No, because there's not going to be a visible gap in those dates. If you do leave it in, though, I would not take nearly as much. I would just say like internship and whatever, I learned X and Y. I just have it be really short. I don't want it to take up as much room, right? Because in Applicant Lab, I think I talk about this. It's something called the real estate rule, which, similar to what I was telling the last person, where you can try to guide the reader in looking at you in a certain way, you can also try to guide the reader's attention. So if you take up a lot of space on the page, or a little bit of space on the page, subconsciously, I think the reader's like, okay, they don't want me to pay a lot of attention to this because it's not taking up a lot of room, but they do want me to pay a lot of attention to this because look at how many lines of text he's devoting to it. And you have the internship is not taking up as much space as the job you had for 2 years at Tata Trust, but it's almost taking up the same amount of space. on the page. I don't have a ruler with me, but I think roughly looking at it, right? And obviously your 2 years at Tata Trust are way more important than this internship you had a long time ago that is not related to what you want to do. It's not related to, so my vote is just to take it out completely. Because you're not going to hide the fact that you graduated in 2018. Like, you're going to see, like, 2018, he's only at the 3-year mark applying right now. It's a little on the young side. I don't know if that's, if that's something, if that's feedback you've gotten so far. So sometimes, people tend to be more like at the 4 or 5 year mark when they apply. But there's also nothing wrong in applying this year and seeing what happens. And so, yeah, my biggest feedback to you is capture that impact. Any of those impacts that you've made, capture that in the resume. Much more. Also, you mentioned when you were talking that your current organization partners with the World Health Organization. That's huge, right? Or is a division of the World Health or something about the World Health Organization, right? The WHO is a huge, famous organization. So when you say, well, we're the Indian arm of this broader nonprofit on iodine, in the US we pronounce it iodine, on iodine supplementation, okay. But when you say, and that's aligned with the World Health Organization, now it's like, wow, you're actually affiliated with this much bigger fish in the pond, as it were. So definitely mention, like, we're affiliated with the World Health Organization. And similar, and also if you have some famous funders, we are funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Fund. I don't remember if Tata, I think you mentioned some people who were funding you. Put those famous funders in. Not all of them, but just the biggest names. And then also you might want to include a quick line about, like, look, iodine deficiency is a big problem. It stunts growth, and because otherwise, since I don't live in your world, I don't know that iodine deficiency, like, what? Like, you get it in salt. Like, at least here in the US, salt is fortified with iodine. So I'm like, who had, so for me, especially as a reader in the US, someone who doesn't work in public health, I'm in the US where I don't know I don't know if this is a big deal in the US or not. So off the top of my head, I'm like, okay, I guess it's like, we're trying to help people get iodine, but it's not clear to me why it's important. So you might want to lay out the scope of the problem. 2 million children in India today have stunted growth because they don't have enough iodine, or whatever that. I mean, I'm making that up off the top of my head. So I would do that. And I think those were most of my comments. The final comment I had here was, you say something like you're managing a budget of X amount of dollars. Similar to the last person, I need to know what percentage of the total, if that is like a significant percentage of the total budget that you have or the total fundraising that you have, let me know, right? Because, the last person was working for a multinational bank, and so she drove some change that was a couple of orders of magnitude bigger than the number you put here. But for all I know, maybe the number you put here is like a third of the budget. See what I'm saying? So helping the reader grasp what your impact has been and the sort of the magnitude of that impact, I think will go a long way. And yeah, I agree with you. I think Yale, Duke, Ross, I think those schools definitely have a good public health. I think one question and one thing you'll need to be cognizant of in your application is to make it clear that the MBA is what you need, not the MPH, and not the MPP, and not the public policy, not the public health degree. So just make sure that you're making it clear. And you're right, with Yale, one of the benefits of Yale is that you can take any class in any other part of the school. So yeah, if they have a good public health program. And also the Yale MBA was originally founded as just primarily on nonprofit management. So that's really in their DNA. So I think that would be a great one for you to look at. So those are my comments. Do you have any questions for me based on that, or?
Yes, actually, I didn't get to speak about my short-term goal. Actually. Oh,
right. You want to work in a public health. You want to be a program officer. Okay.
So it's either that or that. So it's a program officer. I love my field and I would like to continue in my field, but at a senior more position, either in terms of position or the organization. So a program officer in similar development organizations or a consultant in the health and well-being niche in either the Big Four or boutique firms. So how does that sound?
I see. Okay, sorry, I missed that second sentence. What you can do, look, in your application, you could say, you know, here's where I want to go in the long term, and here are 2 different paths that might get me there. So I want to work international long term. And when you say, for example, senior role in an international development organization, make it clear that it's nutrition, right? You've got your solid foundation in the nutrition space. Just stick with that strength, and just say, I want to keep working with nutrition, but I need the MBA to ascend to this level of responsibility. There are 2 paths that might take me there. One, I could try to be a consultant, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't know, maybe like the Bridgespan Group might be a good one, or Dahlberg, or one of those guys. Or I could pursue a program officer job. So it's perfectly fine to have a couple of short-term goals, but the long-term goal has to be, it can't be like, well, or I might work in nutrition, or I might work in luxury handbags. Like, you need to, it does need to ultimately point to the same thing, but it's fine to say, here's a couple of things I'm thinking of. And again, as I said to the last person, if you can point to other people, like, oh, my former boss at Tata Trust has an MBA from a certain school, and she said that the MBA was super valuable in blah, blah, blah. That'll also be good for some of these applications.
Yes. I have one more question, actually. Pretty straightforward. I have a low GPA. I have a 6.5 GPA. So when normally these schools specifically, they mention a 3.3 or 3.5 GPA, do they convert the Indian GPA, or they just conveniently let it out in their averages?
So I think it does get left out of the averages that are reported. Different schools have different, some of them will say, like, here's a website that teaches you how to convert the GPA. Please do it for us and put it here. Other schools will say, you know what, don't even worry about it. We're familiar with the Indian education system. Please don't try to come up with your own version of the GPA. Just, it is what it is. Your GPA was not strong, but was it like a curved type of grading system where, like, everyone got a 6, whatever that was?
No, it wasn't. And I also have low grades in the math courses, though. Okay. I have a 250.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're young, so you have energy. If you've got another GMAT retake in you, you might want to just try to get, the quant score is obviously excellent, but the overall score you might want it to be a little bit higher. But for the low grades, were you involved in extracurriculars, or was there a reason for it, or was it just like, I wasn't really into what I was studying and I blew it off?
I had an extracurricular, but I don't think I'll get the space to explain all of that in my essay.
You will have the space now, because you're going to get rid of that internship that doesn't matter. So you can put that, and then there's something called, you're right, you're not going to have space in the main essay, but that's why almost every school has something called an optional essay, where you can explain and say, you know, my GPA is not a true representation of blah, 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 because I was heavily involved in this, that, and the other. And I was more focused on that than I was on my academics, and so this is why it is what it is. Right. Or you could also say something like verbal, like my verbal percentage on my GMAT. If you don't have another GMAT retake in you, which I get, you could say something like, my verbal score on the GMAT is not indicative of my English skills. Every day I'm communicating with international development, you know, people, and so my English skills are actually very good. And the good news for you is Yale in particular, as part of the application, they give you 3 sort of spontaneous questions that you have to answer on a video, right? So it'll be something like, you know, like, tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult coworker. And so you get like 60 seconds or something to answer these 3, and you don't know in advance what the questions are, because they're trying to see how you think on your feet. And so the good news is that your fluency in English will come across in those videos. I think every school should do this, but I don't know why they don't. No, I'm not in charge of admissions, but if I were, I would have every school do this. So that's going to help you, right? That's going to help you offset. I don't think you should say in your optional essay, like, as you can see from my little Kira talent videos, my level in English is much better than the 38 verbal I got. But, you know, you can point out that you're communicating regularly with funders and donors and NGOs and stuff like that. That's what I would
Yes. I guess another question that would also is something highlighting here is the point about Fortune 500 companies. So none of my companies are Fortune 500 or.
I was making something up. Sorry, but you're a division. You're a division of a global. Sorry, here it is. You're the Indian arm of a global network NGO.
But the Fortune 500 doesn't apply for a.
I was just throwing out the term Fortune 500 as like a placeholder for anything big, anything global, anything international, anything where you are communicating with people in English in a professional setting. That's what you could say. You could say we're a division of an international nonprofit that's based in the UK or wherever it's based. I regularly have to write reports and communicate with donors in English. I regularly have to communicate with doctors or whatever it is. I was just throwing out examples, but anything that you can point to that demonstrates that your professional English skills are very high, I think that will help. You can point that out. Okay, got it. Great. Okay, thanks, Vignesh. And now on to Nitika.
Hey.
Hi there. Okay, so the same drill as before. Just sort of walk us through your background and where you've been and where you want to go.
Yeah, sure. So I am an Indian chartered accountant, US equivalent of CPA. I qualified chartered accountancy back in 2016, and since then I worked with KPMG for over 3 years in risk consulting, which is like a business function level consulting with a mindset to add value in terms of cost savings and process level improvements. Thereafter, I moved to Diageo in the finance controllership role. Here, my role is to manage the raw material and packing material cost, which is roughly like 75% of our total operating costs. I have also done 2 levels of CFA, and I am yet to write my exams for level 3 this year. Apart from this professional background, in the last couple of years, I have been deeply involved in community initiatives as well, especially in the area of child education and women empowerment. Post MBA, I want to start my career again in consulting, but preferably in business transformation, turnaround, and restructuring consulting. So that's roughly. Anything else you would want me to elaborate on?
No, I think so. So I think so. Right now you're doing like supply. Your job right now. You're working with this global company, and you're looking at like here are all the different parts. Like we need glass bottles and we need labels, and I'm guessing this is like what your job is, right?
Yes.
And it's right. Like how can we get cheaper glass bottles, or how can we save money on that? So that's pretty neat. I mean, that's a lot more interesting. No offense to people who work in risk and compliance, but your current job is like super interesting, and I think it's really cool. So right off the bat, just one thing I would say is a point I made to someone earlier that I think it's great that you have like these risk compliance things on your resume. Obviously, you have to put them there because it was the job you had, but you might be able to maybe reduce the 2-line bullet down to 1 line, or this isn't a resume review, so I haven't looked closely enough to be like it should be this bullet, but maybe you can cut out a little bit of that, then add more texture and more color and more details to your current job, because your current job, I think, is really cool. I think one of the challenges that folks, and so I'm glad that you don't work in risk and compliance anymore, is because one of the challenges that I think folks in fields like that have sometimes is that there's a perception that it's more about almost being like the internal police officers that are like, naughty, you can't do that. We're the ones enforcing the rules. So it's difficult to sort of sometimes show a proactive leadership position when it's like, well, here's the rule, you're breaking the rule, so I'm going to enforce the rule. Right? There's a little bit less creativity and a little bit less initiative involved in that sort of a thing. So the other thing I would say is, so sometimes I think risk and compliance people don't get a fair shake sometimes, because it is like, you know, it's hard to say, because I said this to someone once and they're like, but I don't get to change it's the law. Like, I don't get to change the law. Right? I just have to tell my guys that they're at risk of getting fined or that they're at risk of something. So for the risk and compliance work, I like that, you know, one of the first bullet points you put was like, hey, I got an early promotion. I'm like, good. And then just make sure that you emphasize, and I think you start to do this, like, oh, sorry, for your KPMG one, your third bullet point talks about how many people you manage and how many you were managing and how many projects you were. I would put that closer to the top right off the bat, so that right off the bat they know that you were managing a team of X number of people on some of these projects. And then, yeah, I think emphasizing the fact, like, you know, I would start the bullet instead of saying something like, I helped my clients do X and Y and Z, which saved them X million dollars. I would start with, I saved my clients X million dollars by making sure that they were not doing things that were illegal. They were not, you know, sort of putting it, focusing more on the, I saved them money and not the, I'm the enforcer of the rules. And I'm like the, you know, I'm picturing like the hall monitor at Hogwarts in the Harry Potter movies who's like, it's after 10 p.m. What are you doing outside of your room? So that's sort of what I would say for your previous job. And then, yeah, maybe you could cut down a couple of things there to give a little more space to your current job, even though you've only been in that job for a year. But I think it's cool. Okay. And so the short-term goal after the MBA is you want to do business transformation and turnaround. What started your interest in that particular facet of consulting?
So it's mostly, I think it kind of ties back to my story about how my childhood was like, which was kind of affected majorly because my father's company had a massive financial crisis. And during my time with KPMG as well, I personally saw a company shut down because of the financial crisis. And that's where I want to kind of use my professional background to help companies not shut down and not do those layoffs and job cuts. So just a very brief.
Yeah. So like I said before, like, I think there's what you don't necessarily have to tell the schools, like, this is what I want to do. Right? Like, my goal, and this is just because I tend to be a little bit riskish averse-ish in these things, is that I don't want any moments of cognitive friction when they're reading your story. And so I worry that, like, if they're like, wait a minute, turnaround, what? But she works right now in supply chain finance for a consumer product, and before that she was in risk and compliance. So then, like, you would then have to spend time, like, bringing that story forward and saying, like, well, I'm interested in turnarounds because I've seen what happens when companies don't manage their finances well. And so that's why I think that's what I wanted. It's a little convoluted. It's a little, you know what I mean? It's like a little complicated of a story to cross quickly. And also, since you haven't done a turnaround per se, you know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit like, well, what, you know, like, you've seen from afar that working in turnarounds is important, but it doesn't seem like you've actually been involved in, like, I helped a client that was going to shut down, I helped them not shut down.
Okay.
So I think that story, I think you could say consulting, but maybe it could be either, you could say that maybe you want to stay in the consumer goods vertical. I think, again, like, you could have sort of like two paths to your long term. I would say something about staying in, like, the consumer goods vertical. You know, I really love working in this industry. You know, we help people, you know, people celebrate cherished moments, and it's, you know, I don't know, something like that. Like, I really like it. And so maybe you're getting the MBA to either ascend in a similar type of company, or I want to go into consulting, but I think it would be more like maybe supply chain consulting or consumer branding consulting, something that ties in more closely to what you're currently doing. I don't know off the top of my head which exactly that would be, but I would just say, because it's such a competitive process, like, why make it harder on yourself by having them stop and think like, oh, wait a minute, turnarounds, right? I don't want that moment for them. So I think I like the overall idea of like, I want to go into consulting and I want to stay in consulting like forever. I will say not a lot of people stay in consulting long term, just because it's a hard life. And so you may want to come up with a different long-term goal, just because, first of all, not a lot of people do it. So it's like, well, okay, but after consulting, what do you want to do, right? There's sort of a limited expiration on consulting. So I would maybe come up with something else that isn't consulting long-term. And then the other thing is, if someone's in a bad mood, they could say, well, she was already in consulting and she left. So why does she want to go back? Right? Like, so I would be hesitant to say the long-term goal is to stay in consulting my whole life, because they're going to look at their alumni records and say, well, yeah, but only 10% of people who started consulting stay in consulting. Or I don't know what that number is, by the way. I was just throwing out. I'm just sort of off the top of my head. I think like something like 30 of my section mates from business school went into consulting, and I think today like one of them is still doing it. We're 15 years out, right? But when you have a family and it's hard. It's hard to. So anyway, so I would think about shifting that around a little and just making it flow, whatever those goals are, just have them flow more naturally from what you're doing now. In terms of your target schools, you're looking at the first schools mentioned are the European programs, and that makes sense because your company, I believe, is the main head company based in Europe.
UK, right? Yeah.
The UK. So are you ever communicating with people in the UK or working with them? Or is your...
Yeah, so kind of we interact with the Global Finance headquarters, which sits in London. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I would make sure to put that in the resume, possibly also mention it in the essays. So then that way it's clear that even though you have not worked in another country, you haven't worked in the UK, you're working with the UK, right? So you're having that sort of something resembling a global experience. Because my slight concern, I mean, the good thing with INSEAD is that you are working for a European company. Like INSEAD specifically really does like people who have had like, I spent 2 years in another country, or I studied abroad, or, but so in your INSEAD application, just make sure to highlight like, I did blah, blah, blah. And then my coworker, in London said blah, 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 that sort of a thing. Or I took data from the UK and I applied it to the Indian market, or I'm just making things up, but like anything that you can say that kind of highlights that international interaction. Obviously don't make it every sentence, but try to pepper it in here and there whenever you can. And so HEC is France, LBS. Yeah, and then for the U.S. schools, Tuck, Duke, and Darden, what about those schools appeals to you?
So I think the small class size is one, and Tuck specifically because of the consulting focus, and all these 3 schools have great consulting recruitments. So broadly that.
Mm-hmm. So if you haven't already started reaching out to people at those schools, and Tuck in particular, please start that process now. Because Tuck in particular really wants to see people who have made an effort to get to know Tuck, right? There are some other schools that don't care. Harvard, Stanford, they don't care. They don't care if you've talked to 100 alumni or 1 alumni or 0 alumni, but a place like Tuck is going to care. So start doing that now, because it's very niche what they do, or what, you know what I mean? It's a small school. It's kind of in the woods, far away from everything. And so it's perfect for some people, but it wouldn't be perfect for other people in terms of the environment there. So just make sure that you know what it is to be a Tuckie when you apply. That goes for all schools, but especially like if you're like, I only have time for one, Maria, then I would make Tuck that priority. Yeah, I think, I like that you're applying to some. The European programs are a little bit more open to more seasoned applicants. So I think that's good. I don't know about maybe IMD in Switzerland could be one that you look at. Like there's some, you might want to add a couple of other European programs to your list because they place okay in consulting in Europe. I'm not sure what the visa situation is there. I don't know what the visa situation is here, honestly. Hopefully there will be some more immigrant friendly policies under this new administration here. But yeah, so those are my comments. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have a specific concern regarding my GMAT. So it's Q50 and a V38.
Mm-hmm. So again, this is where if you're like, in my heart of hearts, I just can't do this again. Like if you are like, you know what, I think if I really study for the next 3 months, I could get this done by May and I could get a better score, then I would tell you to do that. If you don't have it in you, if you're like, I took it 6 times and I never want to see that test again, then I would tell you to do what I told the last person, which is to be sure to highlight. There's an optional essay where you can say something like, I respectfully propose that my verbal in GMAT does not represent my true abilities. I am constantly, on a weekly basis, I'm participating in conference calls and I'm writing memos and I'm doing anything that shows that you're communicating with people in English. So that way it's clear that this is not your, it's not reflective of your actual ability.
Okay. Thanks. Just one more question about my work experience being 7 years now and 8 years by the next year. So does that negatively affects my application, or how is it considered? Considering the 3 years out of this articleship, which was part of my chartered accountancy program itself.
Right. I mean, it's a little bit older than the average. I think it would be a hard sell for some of the, like the Harvards and the Stanfords. I think it would be it's tougher. They do tend to normally go for younger people. And when they go for older people, it's people who are like, I was in the military flying jets, or, I was doing something really like, whoa. But I think the European programs are more open to more seasoned candidates. So that's why I would urge you to dig into those a little more and see if they might take you where you want to go. And I do think that Tuck, of the schools on your list, I think that Tuck is the one that is, well, Luke Pena left. They had a head of admissions for many years who left this year, so I'm not sure. But in the past, they were a school that was really open to that sort of alternative story. Like they were like the most open-minded school certainly of the schools you have there, in terms of like, I once had someone who was in their early 30s who got into Tuck, but the reason they were that age is because it took them several years to get their undergraduate degree, because they were working full-time and getting the degree part-time. So chronologically they were old, but and so they explained that, and I was like, oh, I think Tuck is going to be open to this. They're going to be like, we love the determination, we love the whatever. So I would hope that they would continue to be that way. I do think one last thing before we go, I do also want to say, if you have the CFA and the chartered accountancy, just make it all the more, like, make sure to not focus on those things when you're giving your rationale for why you want to get an MBA, right? Because it's like, well, you already know accounting. And you're already really good at finance. So do you really need an MBA? So I think you can even talk about yeah, I got the numbers down, guys, but I don't understand marketing, right? So if you make it more like, my long-term goal is to start an organic beverage brand in India, something like that. I want to start, I don't know, some sort of healthy, I don't know. If you keep it in the beverage or consumer goods space, then you can say, well, in order to get there, I don't understand, and I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know how to build a brand. I don't know how to advertise things, right? So then that way it's like, okay, that now the MBA, since it is that sort of well-rounded business education, and since you can take so many electives in that second year, you can focus on the marketing electives and the corporate strategy electives and those sorts of things to round it out. Because then if you were to say, well, I want to be the CFO one day of a company, I'd say, like, you're on your way, right? Between the accounting and the finance, like, you probably get there right now, or eventually on the path that you're on right now. So, I would also just make that, be sure to bring that up as part of the story when you apply for why you need an MBA.
Okay, makes sense.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And with that, we are at 10 a.m. or 10 a.m. for me, exactly. So I think I know Abhijit. I have a tendency to really go over the time, like really go over. But I actually ended exactly on time, Abhijit, at GMAT Club. Aren't you proud of me? He's silent, but I know he's secretly proud of me. All right. So guys, since we are hitting up right against that time limit, I will unfortunately not have time to answer any questions from the chat box. So sorry about that. But my hope is that by giving advice to these folks, you can either see yourself in them, or when I commented on things about the resume, maybe you could take away some of the tips that I gave on the resume. I tried to keep the tips as sort of broadly applicable as possible to everyone. So hopefully you got something out of that. So thanks again to my 3 applicants. I hope this has been useful, and yeah, best of luck. Keep me posted on how things go.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.